Hello out there! It's time for the Hockey Minute, your source for all of today's hockey news with some opinion. Strap in for the fastest news in the NHL. This episode is proudly brought to you by fucking nobody. We don't have any sponsors. Now, here's your hosts, Brandon and Ryan. And here we are. Welcome back to another edition of the Hockey Minute. I am your host, Brandon. With me, as always, my co-host, Ryan. And today we've got a great interview with former Toronto Maple Leaf and pro hockey journeyman John Craighead. But first, please subscribe with whatever podcatcher you use. Leave us a review on iTunes or a voicemail on Anchor if you're fired up about something we said or something you think we should be doing better. We'll play it on the podcast, I promise. All right, before we get into our interview with John, let's check in with my empathetic pacifist of a co-host, Ryan. How you doing, man?
Yeah, I know. I'm doing pretty good. John used to coach me, but he'd tell you I was soft as hell. So the fact that we get to interview a former tough guy is a little bit humbling. But I'm doing pretty good. It's rainy out here. How are you doing?
Oh, buddy, I'm absolutely thrilled to have John on here, and I'm excited to be getting into his pretty wild career all the way through just a nutty amount of professional leagues. I'm sure he's got some wild stories in there.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys.
I know it was tough getting you off the golf course to come here, so we had to wait for the one rainy day that we get in June, eh?
Well, I live in BC, so, we get a lot of rain here, so we get a little bit of opportunity to get on the course. We got to take advantage of it. So I know that we tried a few times, but it said it was going to rain for like 6 days, and then we got 2 sunny days, so we had to take advantage of it.
Got to take it when you can get it, for sure. All right, John, so I thought I'd start us off with just a little bit of almost hockey trivia here. I think the hockey players get a bad rap of being fairly boring and having these same generic quotes. So we're going to play a game where I'm going to read a quote to you and Ryan, and we'll see if you guys can name its author. So, the quote is, how would you like a job where when you made a mistake, a big red light goes on and 18,000 people boo?
Oh, it's got to be a goalie.
Yeah. It's not just a goalie, a bad goalie, too, so...
Oh, jeez. Well, I don't want to start throwing names out on that one.
Any idea, Ryan?
I feel like that would be like a Briz quote, like a Brizgalov quote.
It almost sounds like it, but it's one of the most legendary goalies in the game, maybe even the most legendary, Jacques Plante.
Oh.
Plante, okay. I take back what I said about it being a bad goalie then.
I'm pretty sure he won 5 consecutive cups, but
six-team league. But yeah.
Yeah, he's probably getting carried. Don't worry about it.
All right. Well, we'll dive into the interview here. We got, as Brandon mentioned, John Craighead, former Maple Leaf. He played various pro leagues and then in Europe, and later coached me. Although I'm sure he doesn't want to add that to his resume. John, thanks for coming on here. And how are you handling all this quarantine and the pandemic and everything?
Well, thanks for having me. Well, and we're doing our part at the end of the day. We want to try to keep everybody safe, especially our own family and loved ones, elderly and young. For as far as our family goes, we've just on the shutdown. My son was just finished his season in northern Michigan, so he's home and got out of there before they closed the borders down. And, he's home training and doing the best that he can, like all the rest of the hockey players at home, trying to take advantage of some good family time, in the moment, and just hoping this all passes.
That's awesome. Well, so we'll dive right in here. Tell us a bit just about, the beginning for you playing hockey. I mean, was there a favorite player that you had growing up, or what made you kind of get into the game?
Well, my stepdad is one that actually got me in hockey. I grew up in Sicamous up in the interior, and I just started skating on the outdoor ponds because that's what everybody did back in the day. It didn't take it very seriously. I wasn't a big hockey fan. I didn't like the cold, to be honest with you. I excelled more at the summer sports. I played every sport under the sun. But hockey, for whatever reason, maybe it was because I didn't have the proper gear or so forth. I was in hand-me-downs all the time, but I was always cold and wasn't a big fan of the game. I played actually house hockey up until midget, and then was given an opportunity when I moved down to the coast to play midget AA. And it wasn't until towards my end of my minor hockey career that I was given an opportunity to play junior.
Wow. So when you were growing up and playing hockey, did you see it as a career path moving forward, or was it just something that you kind of enjoyed and played in, and then it eventually evolved into something that you managed to make a real life out of?
Well, to be honest, not really. I think everybody growing up in Canada like just loved hockey. Like
Yeah.
I was born in Washington D.C. but moved to BC at 3 years old. So it was installed in me early that it was part of the nation's sport, and if you didn't play hockey, you really didn't fit in. So that's what all the kids were doing before school, recess, after school, whether it was street hockey or gymnasium hockey or just a big pond hockey out on the frozen lakes. So, it was just something that we did. And then as you watched Hockey Night in Canada, like my dad, I'd always hear him watching Hockey Night in Canada. That was quiet time in the house. And, and Don Cherry come on and, they did all the interviews, and it was just an exciting time. So I think it just, it grows on you. And then when you get out into the street, everybody would throw their sticks in the middle and, separate the teams, and everybody would pick their favorite player. And at the time, my grandparents really loved Dave Tiger Williams, which is ironic because he went on to become my agent in my later part of my career. So I grew up working number 22 on the back of my jersey with not my last name, but I actually had Tiger on the back of my minor hockey jersey because it just kind of adopted, one of my grandparents' favorite players at the time. And it was just kind of ironic how I just kind of fell in that same kind of role growing up. But it was just one of those Canadian dreams about wanting to play in the National Hockey League, and never really put much emphasis on it from day one. That was my main goal. I played it because I just loved it. My friends played it. And later on, it just, was given an opportunity that I took advantage of.
That's awesome. I mean, obviously in the Vancouver market, Tiger Williams is an iconic player, right? Everybody has a few big memories of Tiger Williams. But who was your favorite team growing up? Was it the Canucks?
Yeah, well, growing up in BC, I love the Vancouver Canucks, right? You know what I mean? That's you got to support your hometown team. And, at that time, I just kind of fell into that, segregation of like, this is your province, this is your team, this is your city. So if you didn't cheer from your hometown team, you're kind of shunned upon. And I just kind of wanted to blend in growing up. So you just kind of adopted it, from my parents. My parents loved it. And my stepdad actually grew up in Nelson, BC, and played with Danny Gare. Danny Gare's dad was their coach. So, he grew up in the old school, type mindset and just kind of passed the game on to me. And, and being on the West Coast, Vancouver was our team.
You mentioned you played some AA, and then you got a chance to try out for junior. And I was looking up your junior stats. You had some smaller amount of games. Ladner Penguins, you had 11 games. Then the next year, 3 games with the New Westminster Royals. But 1991-92, you played for Chilliwack, 25 games, 116 PIMs. Did you kind of realize that, the only way to stick was to drop the mitts and fight, or was that just a role that was kind of put on you?
Well, I don't know. Like I had more points than I did play games that year. I think I had close to 30 points that year in 25 games. So yeah. I don't think it was just strictly one-dimensional because, in the short amount of junior games that I actually played, I think I even played 60 games in 4 years. So, if you add up my totals, I think I was close to a point a game with close to a couple hundred PIMs in penalties. So, I kind of wanted to be the complete hockey player. Like I'm a big fan of Cam Neely, Wendell Clark, Eric Lindros style, like guys that can actually do it all, So in my mind growing up, being the complete hockey player was the mindset that I had if I actually ever wanted to have a go at, being a player or getting to the next level. You had to be able to do it all. And so I had a little fight in my bag, yeah, but I also had some good hits in my bag, and I had some will and determination. And I think a combination of that definitely helps you move on. But everybody's always drawn to the 3,000 career PIMs that I accumulated in 13 years. So, yeah, you can be marked as a, that one-dimensional style player, but I also scored a lot of goals in some big leagues. So
yeah. Now you went from Chilliwack to West Palm Beach Blaze in the SUHL, which you're going to have to tell me what that stands for. But that year you had 36 games played, 12 goals, 21 points, 158 PIMs. And so what was that transition like to go from Chilliwack all the way to West Palm Beach?
Well, I actually didn't start in West Palm Beach. I actually, from Chilliwack, I actually got a tryout with the Louisville Ice Hawks. Um, it was my last game of junior hockey in Chilliwack, and a scout had come out and was a player assistant in Louisville at that time, Mitch Wilson. I'm not sure if you guys remember him. He come out of Mare, BC, I believe, and he had heard, through Eddie Beers, who was a 10-year Calgary Flame, that there was this kid up in BC terrorizing the Junior A League, and just shut Paul Correa down in the playoffs, and could have potential to become somewhat of a player or fill his role. So he actually come up my last game of junior hockey, and I actually got a tryout, which was in the Hartford Whalers affiliation in the East Coast. And so at 20, I actually went down and signed with the Louisville Ice Hawks and played a handful of games there. Was in and out of the lineup and was released, and then was given an opportunity in that same season to go up to Pennsylvania and play a game for Eddie Johnson, where I do believe I had a couple of points and fought the goalie and another player, and thought, for sure I'm going to make this team. You know what I mean? I was on Antosky's couch at the time, and I thought, okay, I had left my wife at the time in Louisville and said, I'm going on the road here to get us another contract. And then after the game, I'm on the payphone in the lobby saying, yeah, we're probably going to be good. Pack your stuff up. I'm sure they're going to sign me. I just had an incredible game up here, and the next day I was released. So I kind of was in disbelief, but was getting a hockey 101 lesson on how the things work, and just really quickly learned that you're just a number in the game, and you can be used and tossed around at any particular time. So I had went into the office and was expressing my displeasure of how I felt and how I was being used, and I explained to him that I had an opportunity to go and play for McSorley in Toledo. And I chose Eddie Johnson because he seen me play and coached against me in the BCJ. So I thought, because there was a history there, that he would have known what he was getting and kept me around. Well, that wasn't the case. So he had put a phone call into McSorley for me, and McSorley, obviously confirmed that, yeah, he was giving him a look, but he had filled that spot. But if I give him a call, in 15, 20 minutes, he'll give me a number to a guy that's looking for a player in a new league in Florida. And his buddy was Billy Nyrop, first American or Canadian born to play for the Montreal Canadiens, or American born to play for the Montreal Canadiens. I think he played for the Canadiens for like 10 years. So he gave me Billy Nyrop's number, and I gave Billy a call and said, listen, I'm available, this and that. And this was around Thanksgiving. He said, well, sit tight. Let me see what's going on. And I'll give you a shout back in a couple of days to see if I can bring you in. Well, I didn't even waste any time. I hung up the phone. The next call was to my wife and said, listen, you got all your stuff packed? She goes, yeah. I said, okay, phone your parents for a ticket. You're going home. And she's like, what are you talking about? I said, I was just released. She goes, what are you talking about? Well, you just talked last night after the game and you had a great... I said, yeah, and I'm done. And she says, well, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm getting on a bus from Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and I'm going to West Palm Beach, Florida.
Oh.
And she's like, what? I said, yeah. I said, I'm getting on a Greyhound bus. It's going to take me 2.5 days. I got enough money to get me down there, and I'm going to sign a deal in this new league in Florida. I said, call your parents. I don't have enough money to fly you home. Get them to lend you some money for a ticket, and I'll let you know what happens in Florida. Oh. And that's exactly how the whole career started. I went to Florida, and Billy Nyrop was like, well, you were supposed to wait till, I gave you a call. I said, yeah, but my place, I had to leave the place. They were going on the road, and I had no place to stay, so I figured I'd just come on down here and jump in a hotel and blah, blah, blah. And he says, okay, well, it's Thanksgiving. Here, we'll put you in the team hotel. And it was fantastic. I was eating out of vending machines the whole time. And I got down there on Thanksgiving, and sure enough, I got a nice meal at the hotel, the whole bit, and then went out to practice. And Bob Zronko, we went on to win a championship that year, and phoned McSorley the following year for a tryout again in the East Coast, and it's just never gave up.
It really seems like the key attribute for a hockey player to make it as a pro isn't necessarily skill related, right? It seems to be resiliency and kind of mental toughness to be able to grind it through all these different rejections at different levels. Like I'm looking through your hockey DB here, John, and it's like from 1992-93 season to the 93-94 season, you're on 5 different teams.
Yeah.
Right. And like what's it like bouncing around so much? And was there a point where you thought either you were kind of going to be done and that was going to be it, or alternatively, was there a kind of a moment where you thought, F it, I'm just going to grind it out? And it seems like if I keep putting my head down, there's going to be a path forward for being a pro.
Well, you know what? Every player has, there's only a handful of players that get the gravy train right to the National Hockey League and get the big bonus and all the rest of it. And we all talk about it, hear about it, but majority of them, 90%, maybe even 80% of the guys have really interesting paths on how they get to the National Hockey League. Yeah. And without adversity, you'll never, ever make it. Every player that you guys talk to or you interview on a podcast will be able to tell you a certain adversity they had to go through or overcome or decisions they had to make. And it always crossed their mind that, is this for me? Maybe I should just, go back and work for the family business or get a job, or some guys have families or kids that they need to support. And the game just weeds those guys out, because I've run across a lot of hockey players that if they had the determination and will, they could have easily played the National Hockey League because they've had all the skill, but just lacked what the game calls heart. And you get tested like several times. You mentioned how many teams I played for in those 2 seasons. You're questioning yourself 24/7. Right. Like, do I really have this or this or that? But the more that, depending on your personality, the more you get turned down, the more you run into some adversity. You can let that do one of 2 things. It can either shut you down and make you retire, give up, and become a woulda, coulda, shoulda. And you hear that you hear these stories all the time. I hear constantly when someone finds out that I'm a hockey player. Even just yesterday, I was, was joined by a guy that joined our group, and he found out I was into hockey, and he said, "Oh yeah, I played junior, and it was really good, and I blew my knee, and then I was done." And in my mind, all I see is the 100 guys that I played with that had multiple knee surgeries, wore multiple braces, and are still playing. Yeah. Right. It's not about an injury. You know what I mean? It's about will. What kind of will do you have to play? And then, secondly, it's, you want to prove the guys wrong that don't believe that you can do it. Yeah. And myself growing up in the 70s in Western Canada, up in the interior, I faced a lot of, challenges with race and all these kind of things, and that were never really talked about, 30 years ago. Or even longer, 35 years ago. And it just kind of, like I said, was going to do one of 2 things. It was going to really give me really thick skin and make me, like Teflon, or it was going to just break me and I was going to become a victim. So I just made that decision early in my mind that I was going to prove to, whoever doubted me, I was going to, make it to the National Hockey League. And looking back, if you were to ask me now and then put me back in that situation, knowing what I know now, I probably would have never have made it, because I probably wouldn't have been able to comprehend of what it would have took. It's every day growing and building and becoming stronger and so forth that helps you get there, or gives you the opportunity to get there. And if looking back and seeing what I've gone through to actually get there, I would do it over in a heartbeat, because the experience is totally unexplainable, unless you're a guy that Wendell Clark talks about in his book that he wrote, A Cup of Coffee, that I was so honored that he gave me a page in his book about guys that what they go through to actually get a cup of coffee in the National Hockey League. Yeah. We've got less than 10,000 players that have ever played in the National Hockey League in the world. Yeah. And you got 7 billion people in the world. So even to have a cup of coffee and actually be able to sit down and talk about that experience with you guys and guys that love hockey and so forth, it's just such an honor, and that's something that no one will be able to ever take away. You know what I mean? Not only did you prove to yourself that you can make it, you proved to all the doubters that you could do it. And more so in a situation like myself, for a guy that's grew up playing house hockey, was never drafted, was never scouted, walked on to every team that I ever tried out for, including the trivia question of the oldest hockey player to ever walk on to the Vancouver Canucks that was never scouted or drafted and earn himself a contract. At 30 years old, after being in Europe for 4 years, I come back and earn myself an NHL contract, which never ever happens as a walk-on. They sent me to rookie camp as a 10-year pro, and I went on to earn myself an NHL deal. Unfortunately, too, the Canucks were the best team in the world, and they didn't suffer any injuries. So I was hoping that they were going to have a good run in the playoffs, so I can get on a playoff roster. But that didn't happen. But just the honor to earn yourself these deals and not give up, and and have a successful career. It's just it's great, and then pass that knowledge on. You know what I mean? Working with guys like Ryan, and I own a junior team, for the last 8 years now, and pass the knowledge on and the dream that, hey, listen, I played in this junior B league, 30, plus years ago. If you have the will and determination, you can get out of this league and have a successful hockey career. Hey, maybe you're not going to play in the National Hockey League. Maybe that's not in the cards, but there's also Europe. I played 6 years in Europe. There's lots of guys that can come through our league if they really want to, and go on to play in Europe and travel and see the world and get paid to do it. So it comes down to determination, you know what I mean? And will and heart. If you really want it, don't tell anybody else about it. Get yourself in the bathroom, look in the mirror and say, listen, no matter what you go through, in life, and no matter, how many stones get thrown, or how many roadblocks are in your way, or how many walls, if you can't go around it, you can't go over it, you can't go under it, just go through it. And, I'm a prime example of one of those meat and potato kind of hockey players that, that people, put their the stigma on that, he was just a goon. Look, he's got 3,000 PIMs. Bullshit. I graduated in honors, student council president of my school. I could have went on to university, but wasn't a university-style player. And I had a talent. I was a black belt in high school. I was a 5-year Greco-Roman freestyle wrestler, and I was a boxer since I was 4 years old. Oh, so when I went to junior, it wasn't a big deal about dropping the gloves and smashing someone's face in. And it wasn't never of me going and bullying or just beating somebody up. It was always in defense. I played a good, hard, solid game and stuck up for my teammates. And it was a recipe for the perfect hockey player, to be honest with you. And the stars were aligned. It was just one of those things, right?
John, I'm honored that you lumped me in as one of the players that you pass that knowledge on to. Unfortunately, I didn't amount to anything, but
well, you have. You're still in the game, and you have a passion for it. You know what I mean? So obviously, you learn from so many different avenues. Most influential person in someone's life is a coach. And whether it's hockey or soccer or school or PE or whatever, then it's usually someone else's parent, right? And then it's usually your own parents. So as coaches, I think we have to take it upon ourselves to take pride and take it very seriously when you're molding these young kids. And I'm a hard ass. Don't get me wrong. I tell it like it is, right? Ryan, you played for me, like it is what it is. Don't sugarcoat it. Tell it exactly how it is, and the kid will have a better chance of understanding how to move forward and how to interpret it and how to motivate himself with it, right? But you can't give up on players just because it's a specific time that they might not be as talented, or they might not be at the level to maybe your top player. Because to be honest with you, the top players, they can get it done, on a regular basis and so forth. But it's usually the player that wants those minutes and works hard every day in practice and so forth, that overcome talent. And you always hear that cliche, I don't know whose quote it is, but it's been around for decades, is, hard work beats talent. And that at every level of business and life and sport, hard work always beats talent, because talent gets lazy. And when talent gets lazy, hard work dominates. And I think that, if you could pass that message on to younger kids that, hey, listen, like, there's a lot of kids these days that are soft. You know what I mean? It's almost like you can't talk to them. You can't tell them the truth anymore. And, they're giving out these participation awards and stuff like that. You have to have winners and losers, and that's how you build up your weakest link. You know what I mean? You don't put the kid down and say, you're last, you're a piece of shit. You know what I mean? You don't deserve to be. No. You just say, listen, you got to work harder. You can do this, right? You can become second last. You don't have to be the last guy, right? And all you need to do is just keep going, and you're just going to get better, and you're just going to get better, and you're just going to get better. There's ways to motivate people that lack in talent but have great, aspirations and a great work ethic.
Well, I remember actually when you took over our team, just for our listeners, for context, like we didn't start the year with John as the coach. You kind of, I think, got thrust into the kind of like the last third of the season. We had a minor hockey coach get fired, which I don't know how often that happens, but I remember you came in and you were, like you said, you were a hard ass, and I think we needed that at the time. But I remember you pulled me aside one practice and you're like, Ryan, from the offensive blue line in, I know what I'm getting from you. And I was like, chest puffed up, and then he said, it's the other two zones. You really suck. We need to work on that. And I was like, oh shit. I was like, I remember telling my dad, I'm like, Matt, I don't know if this hockey thing is going to be for me. Like, he wants me to play defense. And my dad was like, well, he's, he played in the NHL. Like, listen to him. And my millennial brain was just like, what does this guy know? Like, I'm going to be a 50 goal, Alex Ovechkin one day. But I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. And I do want to talk quickly just about your kids, because I saw Darian, he played 4 years at Northern Michigan. What kind of advice do you give your kid from a hockey parent standpoint? I mean, it's always, I've always felt it's the best to learn from people that have actually done what you're trying to accomplish. And you having the inside track on pro hockey, you must be able to just pass on a lot of wisdom to your boys.
Well, I've been fortunate enough to grow up in the game, and my kids, have that opportunity, because it's an expensive sport, and it's not something that everybody gets an opportunity to play. So the first and foremost, I always instilled how grateful, you have to be able to actually play the game. And, the nice thing about me is I had an opportunity to run summer camps here. I run a program called Survivor for 18 years. Had a lot of guys that have gone on won Stanley Cups even actually do that program. And I actually just put my kids actually in the program as I was teaching other kids. And the message that I was teaching other kids was the same message that I want my own kids to hear. And so it was a little easier for me to get the message across about the basics of being a successful human being, whether or not, it's through sport or, through business or through education, or through, arts and music. And it's all had a common denominator, and it was about work ethic and about determination, that you only get out of it what you put into it. And I think that, along the way, they see me how I approached, other kids in the older groups and so forth, and talks with the older groups, that they got the message. And it's whether or not what they wanted to do with the message, because at the end of the day, another great quote is, you don't have to, believe in the messenger, but you got to believe in the message. And there's a lot of guys that I coach that I've rubbed the wrong way, that because I have a really upfront, in your face, honest approach of coaching. And a lot of kids are reserved, that are good hockey players and good athletes, that just don't learn that way. And I understand that. I'm not naive to that, and so, when I come across that and I see that, I tell them, like, listen, you don't have to like the messenger.
Yeah.
So in other words, you don't have to like your coach, right? But you have to understand and believe in the message, because at the end of the day, those are the, people that are going to determine whether or not that you're going to get ahead. And what I mean by that is not determine whether or not you're going to play in the National Hockey League or go on to have a successful career, but they're going to determine whether or not you're going to get ice time. They're going to determine whether or not that you're going to get specialty teams. They're going to determine whether or not that you're going to be put in key situations to get the job done. And if you don't believe in that message and work for your teammates and the game of hockey and the love of the game, you're never really going to, be able to understand and handle the adversity at the higher levels. And I always said, if you can get through minor hockey, you can play in the National Hockey League, because they have so many deterrents for coaches that are involved in the game for so many wrong reasons. Hence the reason, I replaced a couple of coaches that have been fired, at a recreational level, which should never happen.
No.
Because, in the process of, the coach coordinators and coming into the association and putting in an application to actually work with the development of young minds and kids, they should know already prior in that interview whether or not, this guy is the right guy for the job. And I know it's very difficult to get volunteer help. But in hockey, for whatever reason, there seems to be an abundance of coaches that feel that they can, read the Hockey Canada book and all of a sudden, be a Scotty Bowman. So, the whole association has to take, responsibility in those situations. And I understand that sometimes it could be smoke and mirrors. A guy comes in and an interview is fantastic, and you get him in the dressing room with a bunch of kids, and all of a sudden there's some wrong messages being sent. So I think that, getting back to it, you really have to, take it with a grain of salt, because first and foremost, it is just a game, and the kids have to have fun. And if the kids are not having fun, they will never learn. Because there's a part of the brain that gets shut off when someone is not having fun and they're upset and they're emotionally detached. There's a development gene in there that just does not happen. You cannot get to that kid and get to his best potential and make him excel. So you have to, one, earn the trust from the individuals at all levels. Like you see it in the National Hockey League level, the approach on how they're having to approach these kids now in Toronto, with the way Babcock used to coach, the way Crawford used to coach, like so many coaches used to coach. There's other ways now that you have to be diversified in the personalities that you're dealing with. You can't just treat everybody the same, beat down guys that aren't performing, and then stroke guys that are doing well. And then, hope that those dogs, want to get out of the doghouse and become great players. So I think that the whole game is changed, not just in hockey, but the game of sport. That, people are, understanding that some of these guys are different than each other, and they don't tick to the same, beat. And you have to be a little bit versatile, more versatile as a coach now to be able to get your message across. So, perhaps maybe that's, something why, a lot of coaches become successful. There's a lot of great coaches that have never really even played the game at a high level that are very successful. My good buddy and roommate is coaching in Colorado, who's a prime example of that. Jared Bednar. Here's a guy that, played the minors his whole life, but just had an unbelievable way to talk, how he talked to people. Like even on his teammates, his coach, you always wanted to be around the guy because you just felt great being around him. For whatever reason, it was just his personality. And you see the issues he had with McKinnon in the beginning, and I just knew he was just going to find a way to get to him, because he's just one of those guys that just preaches the right message. That it's not that he's attacking your character and who you are as a person when he's calling you out. He's actually, communicating with you and letting you know that, hey, let's see this, from a totally different angle than you're seeing it. And I'm just want to just bring it to your attention, because perhaps maybe if you do, see it a little bit this way, that we could actually get more out of you. And some players you have to talk like that, and some players you can whip. You know what I mean? It's just the way it is. Some guys like to be the whipping post. Some guys like to be that center of attention and be that fall guy all the time, because that's what they feel that they need. Maybe that's part of their upbringing, and that's how they were brought up. But all in all, to be honest with you, my kids have had an opportunity of a lifetime, and my son has taken full advantage of it. He's at a point now where, he moved out in grade 10. You know what I mean? He was drafted by Spokane. He moved out and ended up playing junior A as an underage, and he's been on the road ever since. So he played. He could have actually played 5 years of junior A tier 2, but he played 3 years and reported to college, 2 years early, and then graduated at 22 after 4 years, and went to the Vancouver Canucks camp last year. Prospect camp was at the Islanders camp the year before that, and now as he graduated as a senior, he's kind of fell into this little unfortunate situation with this pandemic, but has been in contact with a bunch of pro teams, and he looks forward to signing a deal here before the next season starts.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. I remember Darian was always such a talented kid and just kind of quiet too. I wanted to jump into the Toronto Maple Leafs, your time spent in that organization, because I do remember when you coached me, you were telling me, telling the team stories of driving to the rink with Ty Domi and kind of talking about, okay, we're playing this team and maybe you're going to fight this guy, I'm going to fight this guy. That room had Matt Sundin, Wendell Clark, Doug Gilmour. What's it like walking in, not just to a locker room with an iconic franchise?
Dennis Potvin, Murphy, Matthew Schneider, they're a bunch of legends.
Oh, yeah.
I can't even, as a player, I think I'm more on the fan side of it than a player, even though I was there to help look after him. To be honest with you, it I kind of gambled. I had an opportunity to sign with the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Dallas Stars with Hitchcock, or there was another team that was had a contract on the table. And I remember talking to my family and my wife at the time that was pregnant with my first son, Tristan, and I was like, oh man, like what an opportunity to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs, Original Six, Hockey Night in Canada. All I can remember is my dad growing up watching it on TV, and us kids running around in the street playing street hockey. Like we'd start every road hockey game with the anthem, and like it was just like I was in a fog. In hindsight, I probably should have signed with Hitchcock in Dallas. I used to fight this guy named Kevin Sawyer out of Kalamazoo that Hitchcock had on his team. And I was, always got the upper hand. I was very successful. My style against him was just inevitable. We would fight all the time. And he went on to play for Hitchcock in Dallas for many years and went on to the broadcasting and had a tremendous career. Where here, I more or less, signed as a kid on the franchise. Like I wasn't a kid that did my homework back then. Like I was just so excited. What do you mean? I could actually wear a Toronto Maple Leaf jersey? Mm-hmm. Like I was a fan. I was a fan of the game still. And so I didn't listen, obviously, to my coach or my agent. I had, my coach at the time was Rick Dudley. Yeah. He was like, Johnny, he goes, like, listen, you can play in the National Hockey, but you're just not ready. Why don't you just wait, play for me one more year, and I'll bring you with me because I'm going back to the show. And I was thinking, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, all right. I'm going to play a whole another year in the minors. Rack up another 200-300 PIMs, take a risk of being injured and never getting this opportunity. Or I could actually literally sign a NHL contract right now and have a 6-figure signing bonus and actually get an opportunity to play for, an Original Six team. Like, yeah. I just couldn't see anything else. I just didn't, it just wasn't an option. I jumped at it and said, listen, I'm taking the deal. First deal on the table. There was no negotiation, nothing. I took their first offer and I could not wait to be a Toronto Maple Leaf. So at that time, in hindsight, I probably should have looked at it more on a business aspect and seen as far as the depth chart and am I going to see games and what are their minor league team like and, do all the homework that I help my son do now. As far as, increasing your odds of playing in the National Hockey League. Well, one of two things happened. Hitchcock went to Dallas the next year and took Kevin Sawyer with him that went on to have a great NHL career. And Rick Dudley went on to being the GM for the Ottawa Senators and took half of the team with the Vipers with them, including my good buddy Dad Kessa. And I went up and ended up signing with Toronto, who at the time was going through a real nasty scenario with all that exploitation with the harassment of the kids and stuff in the old form. And Gilmore was having some issues with the whole babysitter scandal, and the team wasn't doing well. And it was just an absolute shit show. So, the organization at the time probably wasn't the best fit for me to start my NHL career in. But in hindsight, I was given an opportunity to play, which is fantastic. got to play against Wayne Gretzky, got to play in Joel Arena and fight Darren McCarty. But as far as what was it like in the dressing room, to be honest with you, it was just probably the best experience of my life walking into the old Maple Leaf Gardens and being a part of the Toronto Maple Leafs and being part of that family. Wow. They welcomed me with open arms. I went in and won the NHL physical that year. I took a lot of pride in my physical ability to get my job done. I was a smaller guy. I played at 195 pounds and fought as a heavyweight, which was very difficult. So I had to be on cue like 24/7. I got there. I just couldn't take a night off. And obviously, the physical guys take to each other. The nice part about Ty was, here I studied the guy all year thinking I'm going to fight him in training camp, even though that I did, sign with the team already. I knew that how things worked, and especially in exhibition and in camp. You're going to, there might be an opportunity or might, be a situation where you might have to, earn your stripes in the room and let let your boys know that you're legit. I wasn't no rookie. I knew how it worked. You know what I mean? I had fought guys on my team in training camp, every year getting to, the National Hockey League. So I knew that there was probably an opportunity or there's going to be a chance that I was going to have to fight Ty. So of course I studied him all summer and knew that cardio was going to be a huge determining factor, whether or not, things worked in my favor. So I come in and, ended up winning the NHL physical. They made a really big deal about it and so forth. And it was the coolest thing. I was in the corridor in between games looking at who we're playing next and who's on whose team and so forth. And when I went in, I thought, okay, if they put me on the same team as Ty, they're not going to want to see us fight. But if they put us on separate teams, it's inevitable because I'm going to go out and play hard. And someone's going to have to answer to that. And if I happen to be playing against Ty, it's probably going to be him. And then I'm going to tell him, we're going to go to a Sunday dance, right? And so sure enough, I went down and we're on different rosters. So I thought, oh, God, they want to see me fight Ty. They want to see where I'm at, right? So I'm like, okay, and sure enough, just a quiet guy, walk around with my headset in, staying in the zone, going to my workouts in the morning, went to the big meeting. They said, oh, there's not going to be any fighting in training camp. And we're like, we know what that means. Played my first game, fight Toporowski, because it's inevitable. You're going to play hard. That's going to happen. There's guys that are obviously signed, but, that they haven't split the clubs yet. And then I was walking through the hallway and I see Ty coming towards me and I hadn't met him yet. And I thought, oh, God. I said, so I'm sizing him up and I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm a little taller than him. He's a little bit heavier than me, but, I got great cardio. I could string this guy out. He don't look that tough, right?
Oh, man.
And all I could see was this big head, coming down the hall. And I thought, there is absolutely no way I can miss that. The way I strike, I'm going to hit that thing and I'm going to hit it lots, right? And so I was actually nervous. Here I am walking down a hallway. This guy's my teammate. We're already signed, both signed. We're going to be playing together. But yet, there's this thing amongst fighters that he's not going to respect you unless you fight him. And that was a thing with especially with Ty. If you want to get to know me, you got to go me. My name's Ty Domi, right? That was his one of his cliches. So here I am walking up to him. My pits are sweating, and I got my hand out, and he's got that big grin on his face, and he shook my hand, and I thought we were just gonna hey, have a good camp and walk by, and I went to keep going, and he grabbed my hand and he stopped me, and he said, hey, listen. He says, I know exactly who you are. I'm really glad that the organization has signed you. I really need some help here. Listen, there won't be any fighting in camp. We're going to save it for exhibition, and I'm glad to have you on board.
Wow. And
it was probably the biggest relief of my life. My whole camp changed after that. I felt that I was actually part of the team. That I didn't have to earn my spot anymore. I was signed. I didn't have anything to prove against Ty. It was just a great, and from that point on, he looked after me from day one. He drove me to the rink. He picked me up. We had pregame together. I just pounded him with a million questions about this situation, that situation, this guy, that guy. You fought this guy. You fought that guy. So we'd always be exchanging, information. And I think you need to do that. It's almost like brothers. You know what I mean? That you're, kosher and Proby or,
yeah.
You have to look after each other, right? So that's getting down to November 23rd, Hockey Night in Canada on my birthday, playing against the Vancouver Canucks. We're playing against Brashear and Gino Ochek.
Oh, jeez.
And sure enough, in the first period, Brashear takes a run at Sundin and clips him late with a knee. So coach says, hey, Ty, Johnny, let's go. So we jump the boards. We're facing off with Brashear and Gino. And on the way out, I'm thinking, okay, well, Hockey Night in Canada, you know what I mean? It's just Ty's stage. He's the one that fights on Hockey Night in Canada because he wants everybody to see it. You know what I mean? He'll probably let me fight on the road, smaller market or whatever. So I'm skating up to the circle and I'm thinking, okay, Ty's going to do this guy. And he hits me on the pads and says, "Fucking show him why you're here, Johnny." And I was like, "Oh shit!" Just like that.
I wasn't ready for this, Ty. Jesus Christ.
No, I literally was not mentally prepared. Like, I'm thinking that this is, I'm the backup guy. Like, I'm gonna be the guy that's pick up the scraps and maybe end up fighting Gino in the second period or somebody else or whatever. But this is the big stage, first period hockey night in Canada.
Thanks, Gord. Scrap breaks out.
All within 15 seconds, he passed the baton.
Look at these two.
I've got to switch be a professional and switch the mood here and go on the offense and challenge Donald Brashear, who at the time was the National Hockey League's heavyweight champ. He went a year and a half undefeated.
Donald Brashear and Craighead.
And I was like, okay, well, I'll show him why I'm here. So, before the draw, I'm looking at Brashear. I'm like, how you want to do this? Do you want to square up? Do you want to, go right away? You want to, how you want to do this? He's like, listen, rookie. He says, get some games in before you take a shot at the title. I said, no. I'm taking a shot right now. Like, we're going, like, right off the draw. And he's like, listen, you know what I mean? Mind your business.
Two guys who have done this a few times, but not in this league against each other.
Within obviously that happened like in a few seconds, the puck drops. And so he's going through to get to his point. We're facing off in the offensive zone. And I put the old hook ski on. And he just skates right through. And I'm hooking him to, getting him to engage. And he's just ignoring me.
If I was the linesman, I wouldn't want to go in there too early. These are two big birds.
So, I'm almost embarrassed, right? Like, he's not even like giving me a sniff, right? So I actually, grab his stick and pull the stick out of his hand and drop my gloves.
Donald Brashear, acquired from the Montreal Canadiens. Canucks haven't lost since Brashear joined the team.
And in that moment, it was probably the most scariest moment that I've ever felt in the national, like in a hockey fight.
Craighead called up last week by the Maple Leafs from the St. John's Baby Leafs, and they're both headed for the penalty boxes.
He stopped and turned around. At the time, he was about 237 pounds at about 6.5% body fat. And I was 195 pounds at about 6% body fat. And the way he looked at me was like he was going to eat me. So, he brought it. And you can see the fight. Like, at the end of the day, I was outweighed by 45 pounds. I thought I did fine. He didn't hurt me. I did what I was supposed to do. I answered the bell. Got all the accolades, obviously, from my teammates. You know what I mean? Let them know that I was here to do the best I could, and that I was going to throw myself to the wolves for this organization. And lo and behold, it was probably one of the best iconic moments in my life to be able to fight on Hockey Night Canada on my birthday against my favorite team, playing for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and then getting an interview with Bob Cole in the tunnel on the way out.
And there's 15 guys in each team breathing a sigh of relief. They didn't have to go in against either one of those guys.
To be honest with you, as much as my cup of coffee is, was still warm by the time I got sent back down. There are moments and stories that I can share over and over again, being on the road, going to New York, playing against Gretzky, going out for dinner, pranking Domi on the road. Like, there's so many moments that happened in that short period of time that I'll cherish for the rest of my life, and try to pass that excitement and dream on to a younger kid that is so raw and has no idea what the realm of opportunity or realm of possibilities are if he just believes true and be true to the game so the game can be true to him. And that's not just the game of hockey. That's the game of life, family, relationships, business, your job, your beliefs. You know what I mean? I'm not a really religious man. I'm a Christian guy that doesn't go to church, but believes in a higher power, and definitely believes in a hockey God, that if you are true to the game will be true to you.
Well, John, listen, man, this has been an absolutely incredible interview. I think it's going to go down as one of our greats, and hopefully we can get you on again to kind of talk some more hockey stories, because it sounds like you got a lot more in the tank there. But is there any place that our listeners could find you, or anything that you wanted to promote?
No, like we're big in the community. I'm part of the Vancouver Canuck alumni. We do a lot of charities here. I own the Surrey Knights in North Surrey Arena, beautiful facility that the city built, $55 million facility. We got one of the best setups ever. We just kind of try to preach the game and wish the guys the best, make them feel comfortable when they're coming into the rink, and let them know that they're part of a family. They're not just playing a recreational sport.
Truly, and I'm not just saying this because you came on, but I look back on my hockey career, and I was about 15, 16, and I realized I'm too small, too short, don't have the drive to really make something out of this. But that half year you coached me, I learned probably more from you in that half year than I did the previous 6 or 7. So,
well, I appreciate that.
So I really appreciate you coming on, and like I say, we do want to have you back because we didn't even touch on Europe, we didn't touch on a lot of stuff here. But
well, Europe, that's a whole nother ball game. You know what I mean? For an African American Canadian to be speaking fluent German in Germany was quite a treat.
I can imagine. But we'll definitely, we'll figure out a time to get you back on. And I know the sun's going to be coming out here in a few days, so we'll wait till the wintertime once the golf course shuts down for you, and you can get your work on that game.
Hey, by the way, my game is horrible, buddy, but I just got this sick addiction, and I am determined to get better. All right.
Awesome stuff.
Thanks. Big thanks to John for coming on the show. Thanks everybody for listening. From Ryan and Brandon, we'll catch you next time on the Hockey Minute. We'd like to take a second to thank you, the listener, for joining us. And a big thanks goes to our writers and production team, Jules, Mark, and Matt. We couldn't do this without you.
Make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at The Hockey Minute, as well as leaving voicemails on our anchor page at Hockey Minute. And always make sure to subscribe to whichever platform you listen to your podcasts.
That's going to do it for us. This is Brandon and Ryan. We'll talk to you next time on The Hockey Minute.